Good afternoon, colleagues. Nice to see you all again, and welcome to the full council meeting. I'd just like to remind all attendees that this meeting will be recorded and webcast live on the council's YouTube channel. I have agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all remote attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking. Now, just if you'll lend me a bit of your ears for just a wee minute, please. I have been asked to say something here, and I'm fully behind it. I'd like you to lend your support with me to the people of Valencia, who are suffering very, very badly, and we send them our love and support. And as we send to anybody in crisis, but today it's especially for them. Okay, that's fine. So we've got apologies for absence, Sarah?
No apologies, Provost.
Okay. 2, do we have any declarations of interest at all? Councillor Melville.
Thank you, Provost. It's not a declaration of interest, it is a statement of transparency to do with the deferred item on housing, just that I am a council tenant, but I don't consider there to be any interest, so I'll stay in the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Melville. So item 3, we go on to the first of 2 minutes that we're asked to approve. So the first one is the previous meeting. Is that minute approved? Agreed, thank you. And the special meeting of the 26th of September, is that minute approved? Thank you, colleagues.
Agreed.
Thank you, Craig, and I was surprised to see you there. You're on your holidays. Okay.
I managed to get a connection, Provost. I wasn't sure whether I would, but I am. Thank you.
Well, it's very nice to see you. 4, and this is an appointments one. It's the Family, Education and Justice Committee, the church representatives. The council is asked to note that Mrs Jackie Wilson has intimated her resignation from the Family, Education and Justice Committee. Accordingly, Canon Tom Shields, the parish priest of St Fillan's Parish, has been nominated to fill the vacancy. The council is asked to approve the appointment of Canon Tom Shields as the representative of the Roman Catholic Church. Is that agreed? And likewise, we have another one. It's the Angus Health and Social Care Integration Joint Board. The council is asked to note that Councillor Meehan has intimated his resignation from the Angus Health and Social Care Integration Joint Board with effect from the 1st of November 24. Accordingly, the council is asked to fill this vacancy, and I would ask for any nominations. And I see your hand up first, Councillor Julie Bell.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to nominate Councillor Chris Beattie, and I have a seconder in Councillor Meehan.
All tidy then. Well done. Thank you very much. Is that agreed, Council? Thank you very much. The voluntary action, Angus, the council is asked to note that Councillor Scott has intimated her resignation from that body, and the council is asked to note that there is no requirement to fill that vacancy. Councillor Vaughan.
Sorry, we've got a nomination for the VAA and Councillor Proctor, and seconded by...
Sorry, Councillor, we're advised they don't want another one in, but I mean...
There's not actually any formal allocation to Angus Council within the Articles of Association, so it's open to have 15 members on the VAA board, not specifying they must come from Angus Council. And we've been notified by the board, a board decision, that they are not looking to appoint another council member at this time, and that they're looking to reduce their board members from 15 to 10. Therefore, there's not a position available.
Is that okay, Councillor Vaughan? Item 5. Angus Council Annual Accounts 23-24 and Annual Audit Report to members. I'm going to ask my colleague, Mr Lorimer, to introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Provost. Yeah, this report presents the External Auditor's annual report to members following conclusion of the audit process for the 2023-24 financial year. Really pleased that the completion of the audit process has got back to normal timelines now following disruption from the pandemic. Grateful to my own team and the audit team to get that work back on schedule. The report, as you'll have seen from the papers, has already been considered by the Scrutiny and Audit Committee, along with the Council's audited accounts. So don't plan to go into any detail on it today. But I do think it's worth highlighting that while there are things we know we need to work on and improve in areas like performance management and workforce planning as are set out in the report also makes clear that the Council is performing well in most of the key areas covered by the audit, and that includes financial management, vision, leadership, governance and best value. And a lot of work goes in by both elected members and officers to help ensure this report is, from our independent external auditors, is not grabbing the headlines for the wrong reasons. So the report, our Council is asked through the report to review the content of the external auditor's report. Provost, and happy to take any questions as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Lorimer. Of course, this report has been to scrutiny and audit, but I'll take questions and comments. Councillor Wan.
Just a very quick question, Ian. I did note on page 44, it says that the Council, on the conclusion part, that the progress with implementation has been slower than originally envisaged in some areas, and they're going to be outlining improvements in the Council's performance management framework to be considered by members in the next few months. What's the main issues? Is it something that the councillors are slowing down, or is it just staffing levels? Or?
Through you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor Vaughan. It's a number of things which there was a report to Scrutiny and Audit Committee back in August, September time, which following an internal audit report around our performance management framework, and that outlined a number of recommendations that we need to take forward. Now, the plan is to bring forward in the next cycle an updated performance management framework, which will set out how we plan to make those improvements. We do a lot of the right things, but it can be a little bit inconsistent. It can be sometimes a bit disjointed. I think there's what the conclusion from both our external auditors and that internal audit review is there's a need for improvement. But we've got a plan, and that's well developed, which, as I say, we'll bring to the next cycle.
Thank you, Councillor Rohan. Now we've got a couple more, and I'm going to start with Councillor Cruikshank and then Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Provost. Regarding the Agile Working Report on page 46, I note with concern the increase in staff sickness rates from 10.5 to nearly 14 days per annum during this transition period. Could you provide a comprehensive analysis showing the correlation between our 6 different Agile working styles and sickness absence rates, including departmental distribution and primary absence reasons, so we can better understand if our flexible working policies are truly supporting staff well-being or potentially contributing to these concerning trends?
Mr Lorimer.
So apologies, Councillor Cruikshanks. I thought you said page 46. I wasn't following all of those figures, etc. Is that something that I can perhaps come back to you on out with the meeting? It did sound like quite.
That's fine.
It's quite involved. We can maybe do that. Thank you. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. And I guess I would just, before I ask my question, I would just like to commend Mr Lorimer and the finance team for getting the council books in on time at the end of June, and obviously the report from Audit Scotland, I think, is pretty satisfactory. I just wanted to ask Mr Lorimer about recommendation 1 on page 47, and this is about engaging with communities about the budget process, and maybe just give us an update where we are doing that for the 25 budget.
Thank you. Again, through you, Provost. Thanks, Councillor Duff. Yeah. So we're halfway through the consultation around the 25-26 budget. We're doing it in 2 stages. Stage 1 has been done, although a report needs to come back to the next cycle, and on the results of that same report in the next cycle will also set out what the second phase is proposed to be. We had actually a very good response to the first round of consultation. if I get the number exactly, but it was over 420 responses to that, so quite a high level of engagement. But we will set out all of the detail of that first part, which was a consultation around the Council's priorities, as well as the proposals for the next stage of consultation, which the plan is to ask some more detailed questions and some specifics. We'll set that out in a report to, the plan is to set that out in a report to Policy and Resources Committee in December, so that that can be launched either just before Christmas or very early into the new year, with the results back obviously before the Council sets its budget in February.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Lorimer. If there are no more comments or questions, can we go to the recommendations, colleagues, which is to review the content of the Audit Scotland Annual Audit Report, covering letter and Annual Audit Report to members attached to appendices A and B. Agreed? Thank you very much. Thank you. A bit of it again, sorry. Submit joint report number 284/24 by the Chief Exec and the Director of Finance. Agreed to? Thanks very much.
Before we move on, it was quite difficult to hear Councillor Cruikshanks's point because his microphone appears to have an issue. That might have also not helped Ian out in hearing the thing. I don't know if other people heard it. It was quite a whistle about it. So. I think it's maybe on his loopers. Oh, is it? So just from our side, I couldn't really hear his question very well. So I don't know if there's a solution to that.
Would it be possible to circulate that to members at all, Jack? Would that be possible? Would that be acceptable?
It's more for taking part going forward. If we can't, it's not a dig or anything. It's more a practical suggestion so we can actually hear what he's saying.
Can we maybe suggest that either you move on?
Provost, if I could just come in from online, it's absolutely horrendous when Jack was speaking here. The sound was ear-piercing.
Councillor Meehan. Right. We're going to go into recess just for a few minutes. We need to get this sorted for everybody's sake.
Can we stop the
Okay, colleagues, sorry for that wee hiccup. It appeared it fixed what was ailing the noise. But we still have to sort out what Councillor Cruikshank said earlier. Now, we either accept that he sends that and circulates it, or I have to ask him to go through it again. So can I take it?
Well, given that Mr Lorimer's coming back with the responses, maybe that could be circulated to everybody. That would be the most sensible way.
Okay, does that make sense, people, then? Okay, so we have an action for Councillor Cruikshank and then Mr Lorimer, okay? Right, can we move on? Is that okay, Jack? Thank you very much. Okay, in item 6, the Angus Integrated Children's Services, the Angus Promise, the Progress Report and the Promise Plan. Now, Mrs Lee. Mrs Lee's going to introduce you. Mrs Lee's online.
Hello, good afternoon. So thank you for the opportunity today to report to you on our work in Angus on delivering the Angus Promise. The Promise is a framework of values for all children in Scotland, but started with and continues to have an incredibly sharp focus on those children in care. Those are children for whom members here today are corporate parents. Parents for 256 children you have never met, but you have specific duties and responsibilities for. There is so much good work taking place locally. You'll see from the report we're a very innovative and imaginative community planning area. We're making great strides in many areas and receive good feedback both locally and nationally. The ethos behind everything you read about in the Promise report, all of the activity that's taken place, is a little harder to measure, because what we're doing in Angus across all of our partners is growing an ethos of understanding, of acceptance, love and care. That's understanding and valuing every child's journey and keeping them right in the centre of decisions that we make. And we can only do that by really listening to what they tell us. It's a fact that you're all familiar with that children who are in care meet challenges. And what young people have asked is for you to think about specifically what that means. What does it mean to meet those challenges in real life? And what our young people, and you'll hear from some of them shortly, have told us is a challenge is waking up in a home where you've only just met the people who are going to care for you. A challenge is meeting your brother and sister, missing your brother and sister, sorry, and never really being sure why you're not together. Challenge is missing your dog. It's seeing your dad once a week supervised. It's not being able to manage your emotions in school. It's worrying if your mum is safe at home. It's worrying if your gran will be able to look after you forever, and if not, what then? It's relying on people to deliver the most intimate of care and being vulnerable your whole life. And then it's having your success measured by achievements in school, achievements in sport, friendships, popularity, status. And so what you're about to see in this short video is the Angus Promise in action. It's a snapshot of the work we're doing to create a genuine culture of understanding, care and respect for our young people. And after the video, I'm more than happy to take questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Lee. As the video involves a number of young people, this will be viewed in private to protect their privacy. Okay, colleagues. And we agreed, so we stopped the live stream. Sarah.
Can we stop the live stream?
Please.
Well, Gary, great. I'm going to ask Mrs. Lee to introduce the report, and then I will invite people to have comments and questions if they want.
Thank you, Provost. I think it's very hard to follow the video that members you've just seen, and I think it demonstrates fully what we are trying to achieve in Angus with the promise. So with that, I won't talk for any longer. I will happily take questions and try to answer them as best I can.
Thank you, Mrs. Lee. And I'm going to ask Councillor Devine, and then followed by Councillor Melville, and anybody else. Just let me know.
Thanks, Provost. Mine's really a comment. Do you want me to just go on? Fairly long. Thank you very much. Well, we've heard from Kirsty, and we've seen the video there, and it says it all really. But this report gives such an excellent overview of what's been happening across all the partners since the inception of the promise. We used to have a corporate parenting board, which a few young people attended, but they decided they didn't actually like that format. So, as in many instances, things were changed because they were listened to, and that's so important that we do that. And young people have now been meeting corporate parents in different settings, which are more appropriate for them. The Angus Integrated Children's Services Partnership still has ultimate overview of the promise, which is for every child, as Kirsty said, but there is a particular emphasis on care experienced children and young people. As we know, they have so many more challenges than most because of their past experiences. Who Cares is a fabulous charity which has worked with the young people from the beginning, and now we also have the services of Angus Independent Advocacy to augment that. And the Hangout is a great opportunity, as you saw there, for the young people to get together and also to meet corporate parents. One of the initiatives taken in Angus to make it easier for young people and their families to be involved in the initial protection meeting, which can be quite difficult for people, is prepare. And there are a couple of paragraphs about this in the report, which I'd really encourage you to read again. I'm sure you've read it, but do read it again because it is a real good Angus initiative. I can't stress enough how multi-agency this approach is, and it's not only for those in social work, education, active schools, Angus Alive, NHS, but it's for the multitude of youth organisations like sports clubs, musical societies, and even the Rotary. Anybody who has any contact with young people needs to know about the promise. We have been so fortunate to have the leadership of Mark Armstrong and Kirsty Lee, both vitally involved from the beginning, along with the work of the two wonderful Promise ambassadors that you saw at the celebration, Kim and Natasha. They have spread the word far and wide. They've now moved on, unfortunately for us, but very fortunately for them. One, I think, has gone to university, and we wish them well. So the teams now take on the ambitious 3-year plan, and I certainly want to wish them all the best, particularly with the development of the whole family wellbeing programme. Just to add a little thing, today I read that Natalie Dawn Innes, MSP, who is the Minister for Children, Young People and the Promise, is actually care experienced herself. And I think she is absolutely leading from the front there. So thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Devine. And then I'll call on Councillor Melville, and then I'll call on Councillor Bell, and just indicate if you want to speak.
Thank you, Provost. Looking at figure 96, we can see that the rate of children looked after has decreased again and is actually now below the national rate. So I wonder if you can just give us a bit more information about what's driving that.
Yeah, thank you for that. So there has been a year-on-year decline for a number of years now in terms of the overall number of children in care. What's probably more important to note, though, is the balance of care. So there are fewer children who are looked after at home. So those are children who remain at home with their families, but under social work supervision. So that has been an ever declining number. So there are far fewer children now than there were 10 years ago who are looked after at home. The number of children who are looked after in foster care, in kinship care placements and residential care placements, unfortunately, does not follow the same trend line. So whilst overall the numbers may be decreasing, the balance of care is still not shifting in the direction we would want to see, which is where children remain at home with their families. As is stated in this report and previous reports that have come through adoption and fostering, we do remain concerned about the placements of children in foster care because we don't have enough local foster carers. We're increasingly having to place children out of area, and similarly in terms of residential placements tend to be out of area as well. So unfortunately, whilst the numbers are coming down, Councillor Melville, you're right, it's not a trend that I think we can celebrate exactly as we'd like to. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kirsty. That was a wonderful film. Really appreciated it. It's comments rather than question, so I hope you don't mind. A really fresh comment yesterday. I heard feedback from a Glen Isla woman who had been on placement in a third sector organisation I'm involved with, and I think her concerns had been around losing her child through a set of circumstances, but being able to engage with the Glen Isla project and that third sector organisation was a real turning point for her, and the feedback was incredible. So that level of success, I think, needs to be celebrated. The other feedback I wanted to give you was the work in Angus on the promise has given me a fantastic knowledge and understanding and grounding in my role as a policy board, but also as a COSLA appointee to Public Health Scotland. And we were starting from scratch there in terms of our approach to the promise. It's a work in progress. But I find the concepts, the language, the care and the love expressed in our work here and nationally has been hugely informative in terms of taking that work forward on a special health board as well. So I wanted to give you that feedback, and I'm really proud of the work that Angus does around the promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell, and I'll bring in Councillor Speed, then Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Provost. I just thanks Kirsty Lee for bringing the truth and reality of children and young people's everyday lives to Chamber today. It was very moving. I just wondered if you could explain a little bit about what work has been carried out with partners in Angus Health and Social Care Partnership to ensure that the partnership is adopting the promise into their practice and decision-making processes, and supports that they have for young adults who are transitioning to adult services, and including young adults with multiple complex needs and disabilities, who may, albeit stay at home with, with family, with loved ones, with carers, but who also have perhaps been through, challenging times within care settings such as respite accommodation or hospices.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. It's a really good question, and it's an area for development that you'll see referenced in the plan. So this report will also call it the IGB, and this will be the first report on the promise that's called there, and I think that's really important for us to pitch it right into the integrated joint board. So there are pockets of work that are taking place, but there's not enough, and I think that comes from probably the work that we've done has started off very much around children's services, and all of the services that go around our young people, from education, health, active schools, etc. But the promise does firmly talk about, the experience of people right through childhood into adulthood. Your care experience doesn't leave you, and it has an impact on you right through the services that you will receive as an adult. And therefore we do have some work to do with the partnership to ensure that the promise is properly underpinning the policies and decisions, how we're seeking the views of care experienced young adults. And so, yeah, I think it's a fair point, and that's certainly something that's on our radar, and our colleagues in the partnership are very keen to get engaged in this kind of work.
Thank you, Mrs. Lee, and thank you, Councillor Speed. Can I have Councillor Shepherd now? Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. Just a comment on the promise and really the first awards ceremony as well. As a council, the awards ceremony obviously isn't something that we have to do, but I was delighted to see the effort that went from above beyond, from workers at the council, local businesses and partners to pull that event off. And just see the young people's faces that day was great. And, you know, going above and beyond, fantastic. And I look forward to hoping that event continues and we'll continue to do it. So really a genuine, you know, as a previous vice convener of family education and justice, what I saw is there's a genuine commitment from everyone in Angus to the promise, and that's just great to see. And I'm very comfortable with the commitment we've got to the promise. So look forward to the next award ceremony. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. And we've got Councillor Boyd. Brian.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, an emotive video and also an emotive evening. So my simple question is, when is there going to be another one? Because it'd be wonderful if our new Provost gets the chance to have the wonderful evening and emotive evening that I managed to do. I think one of the last events I had on with the chains. I certainly hope that we one that Linda can then have the chance to do, as I humbly did as well. Thank you very much. Can you let us know, is there going to be another one?
So I think we're still recovering from that one because it was certainly very chaotic. But just to come back on some of those comments, it was an evening that was very much the idea of young people, and we brought it to life with the support, as Councillor Shepherd says, of local businesses who offered barber's appointments and hair appointments, nail appointments, food, the venue from Angus Alive, you know, very much a show of community strength and spirit in support of care experienced young people, and a genuine celebration of their resilience, because that was the theme. So we are continuing our work with our young people to engage on what it is they want to see. What happened after the award ceremony was a disco that was very much enjoyed by the young people, and actually feedback from them is they would really enjoy bringing their families along to something informal and being able to spend time together with corporate parents, karaoke and dancing, that kind of idea. So we are working on all of these ideas that will bring us into next year, but we'll certainly keep you informed of the opportunities to engage with our young people, and very much following all the principles that we've agreed to as corporate parents, which is on their rules, their space, their time, how they say it's best for us to engage with them, as opposed to how we previously did it, as Councillor Devine referenced, where we brought young people into our world, which was uncomfortable for them. So there will be opportunities next year, and we'll certainly keep you posted.
Well, carry on with the good work, and thank you very much for the invite. And I think we should, just as Councillor Devine said, we should also be thanking our previous deputy leader, who was very much instrumental in helping before he then retired. So I think thanks should go to, I can start with the comments. Thanks should go to both you, Kirsty, and Mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Boyd and Mrs. Lee. And before I go on to the recommendations, I want to echo what Brian said there. I think we should all go along. I'll get you in a minute, sorry. I think we should all go along and join in the karaoke. That's my recommendation. Before I do, I'm going to ask Councillor Scott. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Provost. I'll try and get through this. That was really emotional. I was at the Promise Awards. I was there as a parent and also as a councillor, and I cried the whole way through. So I have permission from my daughter today to say thank you so much. Try not to cry. Thank you so much. She thoroughly enjoyed receiving her award. And it made her realise that she wasn't alone, and there was many children like her. She's also delighted that kids have the opportunity to meet each other. I know only too well the importance of seeing siblings and the impact that that's had on my daughter from another local authority, and the trauma of not seeing your siblings. So I'm delighted that this report's come forward. Thank you.
Oh, what a wee bosom you are, Councillor Scott. Thank you very much, and I think we all felt that today, and it's important that we do, because we're corporate parents. So thanks. I need to get on to the business. The recommendations, we note the contents of the Angus Corporate Parenting Promise Progress Report. 2021 to 2024 Appendix 1 and the Promise Plan for 2024 to 27 Appendix 2. We submit this report 329/24 by the Interim Director of Children, Families and Justice and Chair of Leading the Promise. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, colleagues. And now we go on to item 7, the deferral of the report to Council, the revised Common Allocation Policy. And I'm going to ask Mrs Smith to introduce the report.
Thank you. Today I'm presenting this report on the revised Common Allocations Policy, which was referred from Communities Committee. The Common Allocations Policy is a shared approach to allocations developed in partnership between Angus Council and our Common Housing Register partners, Hillcrest Homes, Caledonia Housing Association and Blackwood Homes. The policy has received approval from the Access to Housing Board and has been presented to each of the partners' respective boards. The proposals presented in the policy represent a fair, balanced and responsive approach to housing allocations, enabling us to best serve the needs of our community while meeting statutory requirements. The revised policy addresses key adjustments required to priority bandings, particularly increasing lets to homeless households, to respond to the ongoing housing emergency and fulfil our obligations under homelessness legislation. Our aim is to make the best use of our available housing stock to address unmet needs, while also balancing this with the requirements to meet statutory duties, reduce void times and create sustainable, balanced communities. Consultation was held on the proposals and 175 tenants, applicants and stakeholders shared valuable feedback on making bedroom entitlement fairer for families with shared care arrangements for children. The policy also reflects a commitment for giving equal priority to individuals with unmet housing needs due to physical or mental health conditions. Officers are considering protections for those currently on a gold banding, which is contained within the policy, ensuring that those with this banding at the moment do not lose their priority during the transition and changes. In short, all of those with the gold banding will remain on that, and the new silver banding will apply to new applications only. This report is focused on the revisions of this policy, and the continuation of a choice-based lettings approach does not form part of the report being considered today. However, should the report be approved, it will allow the prompt progression of planned improvements to the online system, which will enhance accessibility for applicants.
Thank you, Mrs Smith. And now we go to any comments and questions. I've got Councillor Scott first.
Could I give notice of an amendment, Provost, please?
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Do you have a seconder? I just take. Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Without wishing to stifle debate, can I ask Councillor Scott if this is a pre-prepared amendment? Because under Standing Order 15.2.1, these should have been in by 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, I can confirm that we did have notice of this motion from this amendment, from Councillor Scott. We did have this prior to 5 p.m. from Councillor Scott.
To debate this, councillors and colleagues, we need to have a wee recess. Thank you very much. Before we go into recess, councillor, would you like to outline, sorry, my throat is going today, would you like to outline your amendment, just before we go into recess, to give councillors a flavour? Yes.
Thank you, Provost. I move that the Council, 1, notes the proposed changes to the common allocation policy put before Council for approval today have already been approved by the partner organisations in the single housing register application process and allocation policy operating across Angus, namely the 3 registered social landlords. 2, does not approve recommendation 1 in the revised common allocation policy report number 18524 to approve the revised common allocation policy as detailed in appendix 1. 3, instructs the Director of Vibrant Communities and Sustainable Growth to put forward further changes to the allocation policy for consideration by partner organisations, including the following specific tasks. Review the proposed banding change for applicants with medical needs so that they remain gold status, to remove the proposed 1-year suspension period for abandonment and to retain the 6-month suspension period for abandonment that's in place within the current allocation policy. We recognise that adapted and partially adapted properties are already protected for those with mobility medical needs. However, we ask for confirmation, where appropriate, in order to support applicants with medical needs, other ground floor properties that are suitable for those with mobility needs and/or suitable for adaptation will be matched or be restricted to a medical mobility need in the first instance. Instruct the Director of Vibrant Communities and Sustainable Growth to seek input from all councillors as to what performance management information they would like to see reported by officers on a quarterly basis. The performance information should be gathered. The performance information gathered should be provided in a format that covers all the lists, the bandings and property allocations information. The performance information should be shared with all councillors and made available to the public no later than 6 months from the current date. And instructs the Director of Vibrant Communities and Sustainable Growth to report back to the Communities Committee on those discussions with partner organisations with a view to agreeing a revised common allocation policy. Thank you.
And I believe you have a seconder. Councillor Dawn. Colleagues, I would propose that we have a 20 minutes recess. That should be plenty of time to do that. Councillor Melville.
Can I propose that we make it 30, please, just to give proper consideration to this? Because, I mean, I've only just seen it, so.
Perfectly happy with that. We seem to be doing okay at the moment, so fine. Councillor MacDonald, are you okay with that? Everybody okay with that? And does it make the same? Okay, we'll go into recess. And then when we come back, Councillor Doran, I'll give you time to speak, if you want it.
Can we stop the stream, please?
Good afternoon again, colleagues, and that was a very necessary hiatus. Sorry about that interruption. The first thing I'm going to say, as your provost, deem the amendment on the table as competent. I have decided that today, given it due consideration. So that's important that I say that. And now I'm going to move to Councillor Scott, who has 5 minutes to speak to her amendment, and she'll be followed by Councillor Doran, who will have 3 minutes, and then we will see where we are.
Thank you, Provost. I'm not going to need the whole, I'll not need 5 minutes because my councillor colleagues have also got things to say. So, firstly, we would recognise the pressure on housing lists due to the shortage of housing overall. In an ideal world, people would have choice and options, but this is not always possible due to varying needs and statutory duties. We recognise the work undertaken with partners. However, we are elected as councillors to represent our constituents in this forum. I've asked for the abandonment to be maintained at 6 months. Having worked in housing previously, there are many reasons that people abandon houses. Many are vulnerable, for example, mental health, domestic violence or control, fear of a neighbour, addiction, etc. The list is endless. And I'm sure you can imagine that walking away from all your worldly goods is not something that is done lightly. Due to this vulnerability, I feel it's important that we do not increase the suspension to any longer than the 6 months currently in place. I don't have much more to say other than I'm sure the officers will be able to assure us that all that they will protect the most vulnerable and make the best use of the housing stock. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Doran.
Thank you. So I think we recognise that this situation is complex and that it involves different legislation and partners as part of the decision making. And this motion is really to seek the reassurance around the allocation of housing to those who have the most limited options about which housing might be suitable for them, given the proposed changes in the policy. There's lots in the policy which is good, and thank you already for the recognition about the gold status of those people who are already on gold, remaining on gold. I want to thank the officers for the time on this, answering the queries and clarifying points and offering time for discussion in the run-up to this meeting. But as Councillor Scott's mentioned as well, our duty as councillors is to ensure that we represent the people who elected us as well, and to voice thoughts within the forum of public meetings and feed that voice into the decision-making process being taken by the council with the partners as well. I've had experiences of working with constituents in really challenging situations, particularly one who was unable to be discharged from hospital for a period of around 8 weeks, and that related to housing need and adaptations and availability of housing support. Eventually, they were put back into their flat, which was up the stairs. So this required then a 2-person ambulance crew to transport them to hospital appointments. So the allocation of housing has knock-on effects for other services too, which I think we all recognise. And that the challenge is the lack of kind of all the properties to suit all the needs of people that are waiting for housing, which makes then allocations a really, really challenging area. So this is all about seeking those reassurances that those whose needs can be matched wherever possible. And it isn't about creating delay or holding properties or increasing voids. It's just about making sure within that allocation policy we're taking everything we can possibly take into account when housing's allocated in the first instance. So that's why I'm seconding this motion today.
Can I just clarify, it's an amendment you're speaking about, isn't it?
It is an amendment, yeah, thank you.
I need to be sure. Councillor Whiteside.
Thank you, Provost. I'm quite taken aback to see this amendment coming forward. Actually, for a bit of background, the council and the partners started consulting on this policy back in 2022. The proposed changes to the allocation policy are a result of a collaboration of 4 groups of housing professionals who have worked over that time to come back with recommendations which they seem are necessary to help us meet our statutory obligations around housing. In terms of this council, the housing team offered a briefing back in September before the paper was presented to communities. The paper came to communities, so everybody got a chance to see it at that point, and yet here we are in November and an amendment's been presented on the day of full council. I don't believe that any of the people bringing the motion took the opportunity to go back to the housing team during that period, even when they were directly offered a meeting. So I'm really, really disappointed. The problem with not approving this today is that it creates several really important risks, and I'm going to ask the housing, Claire from the housing team to just set out exactly what these risks are, and they're not insignificant at all. And just bear in mind that the Common Housing Register is greatly simplified the process of applying for housing within Angus, and it makes life a whole lot easier for our residents. Not approving this is one of the risks is that we have to come out of that agreement, and it's not insignificant. Claire's going to speak to the risks more fully than I can do. But I just want to say also, every one of us around this table today, we're all councillors, whether we're in the administration, the opposition, or we're not aligned. It's our duty to do the best we can for the residents of Angus, and I would just ask that you listen really, really carefully to the risks and consequences of not approving this policy today. We are in the process of setting up a dedicated housing committee, and that's going to be the forum where we can collaborate going forward for the good of the residents of Angus. So I'm going to pass on to Claire now and ask her to just go through the risks and consequences of their actions today.
Claire.
Thank you, members. I'm just going to run through the risks that we've identified should the policy not be approved today. One of the first risks is that our current ICT system contract is due to end very shortly, and approving this policy is essential for us to move forward with planned improvements to the online system, enhancing both accessibility and efficiency for applicants and staff. We don't want to go and have the cost of upgrading the system on the current policy to then have to make those changes again further down the line, which will be an additional cost in terms of our system development. Our failure to meet our statutory homeless requirements. At the moment, we have a target of trying to meet homelessness by allocating 52% of our stock to homeless applicants, and at the moment we're only meeting that at 38%. So if we declared the housing emergency in June 2024, and the updated policy addresses key adjustments in the priority bandings to help us try and increase our lets to homeless households and to help us respond to that housing emergency and our statutory obligations under homelessness. Failure to consider housing needs of the wider population, restricting ground floor properties to only people with mobility needs fails to consider the needs of other protected characteristics groups and families with young children. Ground floor housing can be safer and more accessible for families with infants and toddlers, making it easier to manage prams and also reduce fall risks. It also fails to consider the needs of older adults who are planning for the future housing needs, and removes choice from other applicants who may have a preference for ground floor housing. Our partners have also previously indicated that they would not support a blanket policy of reserving all adaptable ground floor properties exclusively for medical cases, and that's due to the limited funding that they have available for necessary adaptations, so that puts our common allocation policy at risk with them. It has an impact on voids. If there's a limited number of applicants who meet specific criteria, properties may remain vacant longer, particularly if demand within the restricted group fluctuates or is lower than anticipated. This can lead to prolonged void periods, missed rent income, and inefficient use of housing stock, which again our partners would have great concern about. impact on flexibility and creating sustainable and balanced communities. Restricting allocation limits flexibility in matching available properties with a broader pool of applicants. Without a wide range of applicants filling properties promptly, it can become challenging, especially if properties are in less desirable areas or have unique features that aren't appealing to applicants with medical needs for rehousing. To balance these potential impacts, it's essential that we adopt a flexible policy that prioritises certain groups but allows broader access to other groups when considered necessary. The impact on collaborative efforts with housing associations and partners. This policy has been approved by the Access to Housing Board and by each partner's respective boards and committee. Failure to approve this policy would disrupt these collaborative efforts, potentially jeopardising the established partnership framework, and could lead to the misalignment between Angus Council and its housing association partners. This would not only delay improvements to the housing allocation process, but could also weaken the trust and coordination within the partnership, impacting on our ability to meet shared goals and fulfil statutory obligations effectively. Failure to meet our statutory requirements to consult tenants, applicants and other relevant stakeholders on proposed changes to the allocation policy as specified in the Housing Scotland Act 2001. Under Section 20 of the Act, landlords must consult tenants and registered organisations on any significant changes to their allocation policy. This consultation is necessary to ensure that the voices of those affected by the policy are considered and that their transparent and fairness is when housing is allocated. So failing to meet these consultation requirements on any changes imposed by committee could impact on the policy's validity and might lead to legal challenges. Just some other information. In terms of the abandonment and moving that back to 6 months, that was brought by the policy because that was a recommendation that was made both by partners and by tenants, and that was part of the consultation process that tenants, asked for those and partners asked for that to be lengthened, and our partners asked for it to be lengthened because it brought it in line with other local authorities and other housing associations. So if we were to make any changes to that, we would have to go back out to consultation. Financial implications. Taking into account the impact a delay in approving the policy may have potential additional financial implications could arise in the form of additional homelessness costs if people remain in temporary accommodation longer, or we have to use bed and breakfast because we're struggling in our stock. Reduced income from higher level of voids if there are delays in properties being let and people at risk of becoming homelessness being accommodated, or if it's not possible to assess, it is not possible to assess the full scale of the potential financial implications in this regard. But members may wish to bear in mind that the risks highlighted above in considering this amendment. And in terms, we had some legal advice in terms of our duties under the 2010 Equality Act. And they've come back and said it could be argued that in restricting ground floor properties solely to those with a disability, housing could be under scrutiny for not taking into consideration the other protected characteristics, i.e. the elderly, young children, and we must give due regard to all protected characteristics which they feel housing have done in this policy.
Can I stop you for a minute, please, Claire? Councillors, please don't say anything when somebody's speaking. Thank you.
That's me finished.
And that goes for anybody that does that, sorry. Councillor One, I'm going to take Councillor Shepherd in first and then you. Councillor Shepherd.
Thanks, Provost. This was just a general question on the report itself. I was just wondering if there's benefits of the policy for single parents, and if you could, sorry, just highlight what those were. Thank you.
Yeah, so the new policy that's proposed ensures that people with shared care arrangements of children have equal bedroom entitlement as families with children. So that's a change from the existing policy, which currently doesn't allow people with shared care of children to have those additional bedrooms that are required for their children.
Councillor One, Derek.
Thank you, Provost. Claire, can I just ask you to clarify? I was obviously speaking to Councillor Scott during the recess that we had, half an hour recess, and we were assured that there was no restriction in ground floor properties for folk with mobility issues, and there would be, there would be some kind of discussion. But where are you picking this up from? Because it's not something that we've been told, and you're saying there's been legal advice given. I can't understand why there's a huge pressure on that when my colleagues are telling us that that's not what they're asking for.
Just because we were asked to just review our EIA and that we'd covered it properly, and we were asked to look at that this week.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's nobody being restricted with any characteristics from having a ground floor flat. That's something that you've mentioned twice in your statement, and I don't think that's given justice to what this amendment is. Yeah, thank you.
You want to comment on that, Alison? Anybody? No. No. To carry on. Lindsay.
Hi. Yeah. So I think there is a bit of confusion because the proposed policy does include the use of restrictions for ground floor properties and properties that are suitable for adaptation. So I think that's probably where the confusion has arisen, because that isn't an amendment to what we're proposing in the policy. It does include those provisions to restrict ground floor properties where appropriate to people who need ground floor housing or people that need adapted housing.
Is that okay? Any more questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered if you could advise on what engagement there has been with the Disability Forum and the Equalities Forum within Angus Council, who do have representation from people with a disability within the community and other key stakeholder groups as well, sit as representatives on those forums.
I think Angela Curry's here. She led on the consultation. I know there was consultation with various groups, including different registered tenants organisations, and we went out to different community groups as part of the consultation. I'm not sure if we specifically went to those groups in question, but I'll let Angela come in just in case she knows differently.
Good afternoon all. Thank you very much for your comments. We didn't specifically go to those groups, but we did, when we carried out the consultation, we asked the question of, do you consider yourself to have a disability? To that question, we had 47.1% of all survey respondents did consider themselves to have a disability, and I don't have the results in front of me for what their preference was, but it was 47.1% consider themselves to have a disability, 47.1% consider themselves to not, and 5.9% preferred not to see. Is there anything else that you would like added to that?
No, I just wondered maybe how you hadn't those two forums, given they're key within the organisation and key in representing.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. So previously, when we first introduced the policy, as it is kind of currently, back in 2020, when we were consulting on that, we did approach those forums at that time. Now, the policy itself doesn't make any kind of changes in terms of those restrictions. That's not a change. We were using property restrictions. We will continue to restrict adapted properties, so only people with an adapted housing need can be matched to those properties. So we hadn't introduced changes to those restrictions. So we did approach those organisations previously, we didn't on this occasion.
Colleagues, can I move on for a minute? Sorry, Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I just had a question. It's from page 113 of the combined papers, 5.2,
under current position. Tenants, applicants and other stakeholders have participated in the review of the Common Allocation Survey. This was in autumn 2022. Excuse me, there were 123 responses. So can anyone give me an idea as to what that is as a percentage of all of our council house tenants? And if they aren't able to give us that as context, then instead can you tell me how many Angus Council house tenants we have in total?
So yeah, the initial consultation was undertaken before the development of the revised policies. That was to get feedback in terms of what people would like to see changed and how they felt the existing policy was working for them. From that, there was 28% of those identified themselves as a tenant of one of our CHR partners. So 28% of 123 responses. Somebody good at that? Yeah. Yeah. And we also had a number of applicants as well. So when we're consulting on the policy, it's not just tenants. We need to consult with applicants and other stakeholders as well as tenants. So, yeah.
Provost, if you don't mind. Thanks for that. I mean, that information is there in paragraph 5.2. It's all very information that I can see and have read and have worked out for myself. So you haven't really answered my question. What, as a percentage of the 123 participants, were Angus Council tenants? And to give that some context, how many Angus Council tenants do we have in total?
So I'm not sure if we asked specifically if the respondents were Angus Council tenants or a tenant of one of our tenants or one of our CHR partners. Angela might be able to confirm that. In terms of the total number of tenants that we've got 7,777 properties in Angus. So I don't know exactly the number of tenants because there'll be joint tenants within and single tenants within that stock, so I'd have to come back to confirm that. But if Ange could come in and confirm how many Angus Council tenants took part in that consultation.
Hi. Unfortunately, when we carried out the survey, it was based on a tenant of one of the partners, so we can only base it on if they were a tenant of the partnership, not an Angus Council tenant. So I would need to go back and have a look and bring that information back to you.
Could we get the information back to you, Councillor Graham, because it's impossible for her to get it today. That's reasonable. That's reasonable.
Thank you.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. I appreciate that our housing colleagues have mentioned the financial impacts. Maybe could I maybe ask Mr. Lorimer what if he could quantify what those might be, and where would the financial impacts affect? Would it be the council or the housing revenue account? It'd be useful to know that.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. I was walking and listening there. So, in terms of the financials, what we've flagged in terms of the narrative is simply the financial risk, because it's not really possible to quantify the figures in any kind of detail. I think it mentions housing voids. If those were to rise as a consequence of any delay in the policy, that would impact on the housing revenue account. If it was problems in relation to homelessness, then that would be more of a general fund implication. But as I said, it's the financial implications narrative that, and Claire had read some of that out. It's simply to flag the risks rather than saying there is definitely going to be additional financial implications with this proposal. It's simply to flag the risks, so members can bear that in mind in considering the amendment.
Okay, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Lorimer. And sorry, I beg your pardon. Thank you, Mr Lorimer. I'm going to have Councillor Melville, and then I'm going to try and wrap up before I ask Councillor Scott to come back in again.
Thank you, Provost. And it's further to the financial point. If the partnership is at risk, does that have any implications for our own staff in terms of financial cost? Because obviously we work jointly with the partnership on housing applications. So if the partnership is put at risk, then does that have implications for our staff? Could you clarify that, please?
Yes, so the partners contribute to 4.5 full-time equivalent posts, so those would be at risk. We would obviously have to, if should the partnership not be there, we would need to look at those posts and the staffing implications of that.
And can I just clarify further that if we then had to set up our own allocation policy, that would also involve significant cost, is that right?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, so that would mean we would have to resource that ourselves, so that may be more, obviously, or less at this stage. Obviously, we would need to quantify all of that. But in terms of additional staff resource to do that, plus actually, managing the allocations policy on a day-to-day basis, we would need to look at those new financial implications.
I think I'm reminded to go into comments because we didn't actually have them before I asked Councillor Scott and Councillor. Would anybody like to make a comment? Mrs. Reid.
Thank you. Our goals are for Angus to be a great place to live, work and visit, and to maximise inclusion and reduce inequalities. Today we are here to address a pressing issue, an issue that strikes at the very heart of equality and human dignity. We're here to talk about a proposed allocation policy. However, within this debate and discussion, we need to recognise the barriers that people with physical disabilities face in accessing the built environment, particularly housing. These barriers are not just physical, they are societal, economic and deeply ingrained within our systems. Imagine, if you will, a world where every step is a mountain, every door is a fortress, and every journey is a test of endurance. This is the daily reality for many people with physical disabilities. The built environment, which should be a source of comfort and security, often becomes a landscape of obstacles and of exclusion, where dignity and independence is stripped away. Housing, a basic human right, remains out of reach for many, and the lack of accessible housing is a glaring issue. Too often, homes are designed without considering the needs of all individuals. There is limited choices for people with disabilities within the built environment and within our housing stock. Whether it's getting in and out of their homes safely, crawling, or even having to be carried up and downstairs to their bedroom or bathroom, or perhaps even not having to sleep downstairs on sofas and chairs. For some, accessing basic facilities like toilets and showers is no longer possible in their current home. With medical cases increasing, an ageing population and disability and ill health on the increase, we need to protect our ground floor accommodation. This proposed policy needs to consider our overall housing stock more robustly. We currently have a low percentage of our property suitable for individuals and families with disabilities. In Scotland, colleagues, only 1% of housing stock in Scotland is suitable for wheelchair users, and only 7% have partial adaptations. If we cannot ensure within our policy that these individuals are prioritised, we're only prolonging these challenges. Just to be clear though, we are only asking that we protect and prioritise whenever possible. Obviously, some of the stock has already been prioritised and restricted, but we're asking for further protections. That doesn't mean to say it doesn't open it up to others. We need a robust allocation policy. This policy talks about choice, how for applicants...
Please sum up, please.
I'll sum up, okay. What I would like to do is ask members to be aware of the consequences of the proposed changes being made today and to support the amendment. I urge you to help ensure that we have correct policy in place. I appreciate your concerns, but we must get this right for our most vulnerable and those with greatest needs. In conclusion, we need to make best use of the stock. We need to make sure that we take time to get this policy right. We've already had a choice-based letting system and a policy introduced that has caused trouble for our applicants. We need to make sure we do not get this wrong. We need to ensure a future where the built environment is a testament to our commitment to equality and human rights, particularly for those with the greatest physical needs and barriers. I would also, just before I finish, like to draw your attention...
We'll finish very soon, Councillor Speed, I'll finish it.
A report in 2017 which advised that we would expect initial costs of £25,000 with a £3,750 cost per annum of maintenance supports charge for our new system. The costs over the last 4 years have actually risen to £209,000 to bring in choice-based letting and this allocation policy. This is £50,000 per year. So I don't think today that the cost should be a factor in making our decision to support the amendment. Thank you.
I want to go on to Councillor Gregg and then
thank you. As I've mentioned at previous meetings and committees before about the way that the council engage with tenants or groups or doing any kind of survey, the response rate is always incredibly low, and I think this is a prime example of this, especially when it's discussing something so important to all of our tenants and with those with partner agencies. A response rate of 123, and doing a bit of rough calculation here, I've worked out that that's, for us as a council, for our tenants, is about 1.5% of the population of our council housing. So in other words, that's 98.5% of people that haven't engaged. I think that's shockingly low and shockingly bad, and I think we as a council must work a lot harder to properly engage with these tenants and actively engage with them, whether that means by physically knocking on their doors with a survey and asking if they'll do it on the doorstep. Then if that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do, because otherwise, I mean, 1.5% is almost meaningless. I'd also considering asking Councillor Scott if she might be willing to make a slight change to her amendment on part 3B to perhaps include the words people with mental health issues or vulnerabilities, if that might be something she might be willing to agree to. Thank you.
I'm going to bring you in just shortly anyway, Jill, if you just keep it to there, if that's okay. But that'll be considered, Councillor Gregg. Okay. Can I ask Councillor Shepherd, please?
Thanks, Provost. The document we're looking at today, you know, it does bring about quite big changes for single parents who, you know, only the parent who receives child benefit would be considered for a second bedroom if they had a child, where the changes here would mean that both the mother and father would, as long as they're looking after the child each for a certain amount, would both be able to apply for a bedroom. I think that's a really good positive change that it would be good for modern Scotland. So whether this goes through today or not, or in the future, you know, I think that's just a positive change that we're striving to. So that's something that the document's got right. And it's also just good to see robust debate on such an important document today, so and everyone taking part in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. And I'm going to bring in Councillor Boyd, then Councillor MacDonald. Brian.
Thank you, Provost. This is a very complex subject, and it's a pity we can't pick and mix what we would like, but that's the job of being a councillor. It's hard decisions at times like this. I suppose the big one that's getting to me is the bits about the abandonment and the medical need. I'm thinking of, even in Carnoustie, very proud to have been the first council houses that were built in Carnoustie in 20 years. Were built in Carnoustie. People will maybe remember them. We've now got the site right beside it, which is taking years and years to even get anywhere. So hopefully the 3.4 billion that's now coming to us with the new thank you, Councillor or Heather, for bringing forward this motion, because hopefully we can. The big problem we have here is lack of money. We need the investment in it. This is though we're talking about financial implications, that's a drop in the ocean to what we're actually needing to do with our housing within Angus and in Scotland. That's why we've got this housing emergency that's finally been declared. So the medical one, the gold, I know of 3 people that were trying to get one of these 8 houses in Carnoustie that were all gold. So I can't see why we should be trying to reduce them. You know, I had 3 different people phoning me, pleading with me. Of course, it's not for us to, as councillors to step in. We can't make that judgment. That's then left to the officers to then make that. But that just shows how dire things are when people with health issues are trying. One of the family, the people that got it, had been waiting 9 years. 9 years with disabilities to get that house in the town, you know, and so therefore we must get this better. We must get better at it, but we need these finances, and I'm hoping them coming. And the abandonment was the other one where it is shocking. It's shocking that people, that with all the circumstances that Councillor Scott mentioned, we must try and protect these people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. And before I ask Councillor MacDonald, I'm going to ask Alison Smith to come back in, please.
Thank you. It was just a couple of points, probably just to repeat but clarify. Just in terms of the abandonment, I mean, that proposal has come from the consultation engagement work with the partners and tenants. So that proposal has been feedback about bringing us back into line with other local authorities. So hence that proposal has been brought forward on that basis. And just to clarify, however, that doesn't apply to those that are homeless. And just read the point on the gold, it's not being reduced. I suppose it's a renaming probably of the categories as such. And we have agreed that just to sort of ease the communication around that, those that are currently gold will remain as gold, and it would only be any new applications that would then be moved to the sort of new naming convention of silver. But it's not a downgrading in terms of the actual banding. And I just wanted to highlight that we absolutely note in terms of the engagement, we see that a lot with our engagement levels, and we are bringing a new tenant participation strategy to the next communities committee. So that is an area that we know needs addressed, and we're bringing that report forward to the next cycle. So if Claire wants to add anything else.
I was just going to come back on the abandonment. So I know, Councillor Scott, you raised, about somebody fleeing domestic abuse, etc. So anybody that ends up then coming back through the homeless route, etc., is not subject to obviously the abandonment. That wouldn't be held against their application. We would always make that application live based on those circumstances.
Yep. So, Claire, I'm absolutely aware of that. However, I've been dealing with a constituent recently that actually doesn't want to report domestic abuse because she's terrified. So, if she was to leave her house, she would get an intentionality decision. And whilst you protect and obviously house people that have a homelessness priority, if they get an intentionality decision, that's my concern. So we make life is really difficult for them for 6 months. If we increase it to 12, it's going to be, and these are, and I can't imagine, probably neither can you, leaving your house and leaving all your belongings, your photos of your children, your granny, whatever it is. These are all sentimental items. If you were to walk away from that and then we're penalising them further by going up to 6 months, it's a small ask. We're not asking you to delay things massively. These are 3 minor asks. That's all it is. Financial, you haven't really been able to tell us. I can't see where the impact would be. We're not asking to hold tenancies. We're not asking for all properties. I don't know where that came from. We're not asking for all properties to go to medical. We expect flexibility. You need flexibility to deal with people. So these are 3 minor asks. We totally appreciate and value our partners as well. So if all we're asking is that you could go back and ask these very quickly and get back to us, that's all. Thank you.
Sorry, that feedback came from them. And obviously in terms, Councillor Scott, just with that case that you're dealing with as well, we wouldn't expect her, if that person doesn't want to report it to the police, we don't look for that evidence. So we would take her word, her word at that.
The problem is, Claire, sorry, that she doesn't want to report it full stop because she's scared that word will get back. Do you know what I mean? So if she speaks to a housing officer, she's frightened that word will get back, and people do live in fear, and then they would be penalised. So that's my concern. It's vulnerable people, and we're not helping them. Who does that help to prolong it? And I noticed Dundee have changed theirs to 12 months, but Aberdeenshire haven't, and I think a couple others that I've looked. Not everybody's doing 12 months, so why do we need to? But thank you.
I'm going to move on to Councillor MacDonald, and then I'm going to see if we can get this wrapped up as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Provost. Can I just check? The first iteration of this was 2020, is that correct? So that was brought forward by Councillor Fotheringham. Councillor Speed was in the administration at the time. It was brought forward by Councillor Stewart as the Vice Convener of the Committee, and we're asked to just make these amendments now. Councillor Cowdy, Councillor Braze and myself brought it through conveners to get it to Communities Committee, and we've used the expert views of our housing shared providers as well as our own staff to get it to this point. I think from what I've seen from the amendment, there is scope going forward to look at all of these things as part of our housing improvement, options and plan. I think our problem with housing at the moment is, and I said when I first took over as the convener of the Communities Committee, that I would speak to anyone and everyone about any issue. And we've shown in the Communities Committee that we've not only supported opposition members in policies they wanted to bring forward or supported amendments, but we've also worked directly to make sure voices are heard on topics that could have been forced through that weren't. When it comes to the housing situation, the conversations I had with opposition elected members was around it shouldn't be a political football. It shouldn't be something that we're all fighting over. It should be a collaborative approach, and that's why we're planning and trying to get to a point where there is a standalone housing situation, a housing committee, that we can actually get proper feed-in from people, as I've mentioned in previous meetings, with expertise like Councillor Scott is showing today. The issue that we have by delaying this is the impact on homelessness, the impact, it's all been said. I don't need to go over it again. But what I'd like to get to a position is that we can have these conversations before we get to the meeting, before we get to the amendment stage, so that actually it can get sort of thrashed out as to what our ambitions going forward are. So the options we've got when it comes to housing is, and it is a speed thing, and maybe the council needs to have another briefing about where we are on our voids policy, because I've heard a lot of chat about the situation with our voids. I've heard a lot of chat about the situation with tenancies that look like they're not occupied anymore. I've had a lot of chat about, Councillor Gregg's right, the consultations maybe not been the best historically, but things have been put in place to try and rectify those things. And the first thing I said when I spoke to Councillor Fairweather was, because this goes back across multiple administrations, SNP administrations, Conservative-led independent administrations, independent-led Conservative administrations, the housing problem that we've experienced, you don't want to be throwing individual people under the bus because we're making the decisions in good faith. The issue around the shared list system, the common allocations policy, the old system where it was like a ladder up and down, we were all presented with, this is the best way forward. We need to get rid of clerks of works. I know Councillor Nicholl was against all that. That was the chat, and then we'll put it on to housing officers to do the work. That was a decision that I don't want to say, Councillor Nicholl, that's your fault because that was your administration. Because in hindsight, it's not your fault. It was a bad decision. We didn't get it right. So going forward with things like this, I think we need to pass the motion as it stands, the proposals that we've got, but with the commitment to look at absolutely everything that's been raised today as part of our housing improvement plan, as part of the housing committee potentially being set up if members want that, and actually look at housing from a place of we're all working on it together, because nobody's sitting in the chamber with their individual casework going, we don't want to do that because that's going to mess up the other person. That's not what this is about. So for my final plead, it is effectively, I think we should pass the plan because it aligns with what our partners have requested, it aligns with what we've submitted and we want to go forward with, but with that commitment that we'll look at absolutely everything that's been discussed today and how it fits in to our housing service going forward. I think that's the best I can certainly offer, and the door in terms of being the convener of the Communities Committee for anything that comes forward through that committee is open so that we can actually be a proper functioning council. And the reason that I made that shout was during the election and during elections we've all had before, people are sick of the political stuff and they just want us to try and get on. And certainly with Councillor Fairweather, I've had decent conversations with Councillor Stewart about matters. There's been other councillors across the chamber that's been the case. I'd rather we have a functioning council that gets the right decisions rather than one where we're just fighting for no real reason. That's why I think we need to support the officers here, but with the commitment that we will look into absolutely every single item that's been raised today.
Councillor One.
Thank you again, Provost. Just a very quick one, and I would like to just state where I am on this, and I do support the amendment, I'm going to admit. And it's not political, and I'm glad Mark, who did start off, Councillor MacDonald started off saying, let's not make this political. We are not making it political. It wasn't a Conservative amendment that came forward. It's something we've listened to, so I'm glad that you've agreed to that. You also picked up on the errors in our ways, maybe with the housing officers in the past. That was obviously something that was directed by officers, not blaming officers. It was probably the right idea at the time. We went along with it. Today, we actually want to challenge some of the things that the officers are asking for, and I believe that that's why we're here. We're not here expected to just agree to motions, and that is really why we are now wanting to say, let's look at this amendment in all seriousness. We're speaking about the issue of changing this. What about the issue to the human feelings, the housing issue that we do have? We called for a housing emergency. It was thrown out first time round. It was introduced a month later or 6 weeks later as a second time attempt, where we all did agree, and it was great to get consensus. But this time we are really challenging this, and we think that Councillor Scott's amendment here, along with Heather and Lois, is probably the right thing to be doing. So I certainly will be agreeing with the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, I think it's time to move on, and I really would like to ask Joe, considering you had something else to consider there, I think it would be important if you just summarised quite succinctly what it is you want.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg, for your request, but I just think we can't limit it to mental health only. As I've said, and I think you probably heard, there's multiple varying reasons that people abandon houses, and it's not just about mental health. However, that is one of the things. It's not the only consideration. So, yeah, sorry, I wouldn't want to be amending that. Thank you.
And Heather, is there anything else you'd like to add? And then I will move on and look for somebody to pass this motion.
Yeah, thank you, and appreciate having this debate today. I think one of the recognitions is that both myself and Councillor Scott were elected in the new kind of the last election, so we weren't part of the previous kind of conversations around this. We also see the policy when it is published in the papers. That's when we see the final policy version, and so within our decision-making mechanisms, bringing amendments is ways in which we can create those changes within it, and it should open up conversation. It is challenging. The timings around these things are incredibly difficult to work with, given that officers' time, our time as councillors, and the short turnaround between the publications of papers and the meeting dates. It makes it difficult. And we're all keen to work together. These are things that we think are important. We really want to seek reassurance on these because it isn't clear within the policy as it stands. As mentioned before, we recognise that there's some really positive parts of this policy, but these are things we wanted to raise within our amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Doran. And now I'd like to move on and ask somebody to move these recommendations. Councillor Whiteside.
Thank you, Provost. I would like to move the recommendations as they stand, and I would like to just address a couple of the issues that have been raised. Like I said in my earlier speech, there was a staff briefing back in September on this policy, and it was the papers were issued in September for the Communities Committee on the 1st of October. So we've had plenty of time to consider this, and like I said, the concerns haven't been brought back to officers until this week, which is really disappointing. I think the risks raised by Claire are significant, and I think it would be foolish not to take them on board. And Councillor Speed mentioned barriers. Well, we're actually putting, if we don't approve this today, we're putting barriers in place for the officers to take this forward and help the residents in Angus, and they're putting the collaboration with our partners at severe risk. So I would ask everybody to think very, very carefully before supporting these amendments, and I propose that we accept the recommendations as they stand.
Councillor, do you have a seconder?
Yes, just to say that I'll second this because I think I seconded the motion when it was at the Communities Committee, and I strongly believe that there is really, in terms of the amendment brought forward, I don't really see just how much benefit there is compared to what is being put at risk. And I think as Councillor MacDonald put it, we need a housing committee, a standalone housing committee. We have a MOG up and running, perhaps to bring that forward. That will be for council to decide. But that will be meat and drink for the new committee, all this sort of stuff, so that we're not coming here to full council when the report's already written and amending it at the very last minute. The Housing Committee will have all that work to do well in advance. I really don't want to jeopardise our collaboration and our efforts with our partners just for what the small benefits or perceived benefits that this amendment brings. We're, going away back to consultation again. I just don't see it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Braze. And we have an amendment raised by Councillor Scott and seconded by Councillor Doran. And I feel I've given enough time for that now. So I would just something else, sorry. Sorry, I think it's absolutely important that we actually allow people to speak. So I'm going to bring Claire back in.
Okay, it's just to confirm, in terms of, making sure that we are prioritising ground floor properties and looking at that in the first instance, that's something that we've always done. It's just not really been explicit in the policy. So this is just to make it more explicit in the policy. We will continue to match those who need adapted and partially adapted housing, and we will consider, and we will continue to consider, and we will build into our staff guidance, to make sure when it's a ground floor property that we are making best use of stock and prioritising in that way. And that's what we've always done. It just wasn't really explicit in the policy before, so that's why we've done that.
Thank you, Claire. And Alison.
Thank you. So it was just really to add to that from what Claire was saying, in terms of the amendment, I think we were saying that area is covered within the paragraph regarding adapted and partially adapted properties. I think we've addressed 3A in the changes that we're proposing to make. So just for that clarity, is it the 3B that remains the area of concern that we would go back and consult on that again?
Are we able to answer that?
Apologies. It was just seeking clarity on that element of on the elements of the amendment. 3A, the proposed banding changes, I think we've covered in terms of what we're proposing with the changes that we outlined earlier. Claire's covered off the paragraph regarding the adapted and partially adapted properties. So it would remain the 1-year suspension is the main issue. Would that be right?
I do want to come in on that. I think it would be good to make it explicit about those protections on policy, because I think that is, if there's something to be added in there, because it wasn't clear, and I don't think for people who are then reading it and seeing it, it's not clear that is protected. If that is happening, and we know that it was happening, that's good, but I think because this is a new policy, it needs to be clear that is something that's in there. And we've had the conversations about the adapted policy and partially, so I think it's just making sure that is in there. So I'd like a little bit more on one, yeah, so to making sure that is clear. And then the other question is then the around the suspension kind of.
I'm going to just get that conversation first. I will bring you in again, Councillor Speed. You'll need to be succinct because I'm just really getting to the nitty-gritty here. Councillor Speed, do you want to come? I'd really like to think we're getting some consensus here, and it would be really good. So I don't want to stop it. Councillor Scott, have you got something to say?
No, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm happy with what Councillor. My microphone. Sorry. I do want the suspensions looked at because I do think that risks vulnerable people, and I agree with Councillor Doran. I would like to see those protections. I'm happy that you have them and that you do them. I would like to see them built into the policy, please. Thank you.
Can I ask that? Is that possibly?
Yes, so the restriction criteria for ground floor housing is in the policy, so it is in the new policy. So I think that's where we're getting a little bit confused, because that is already there, and it does say we will restrict, when appropriate, ground floor properties for only people who require that type of property. So I'm not sure what more we could really do with that.
Question, Councillor Speed.
It was really just a point of clarity, and just in relation to that part of the discussion around. So that's a question, point of clarity. Yeah, because it says may, and I think what the amendment was seeking was a greater reassurance that in the first instance, so the adapted properties and the partially adapted, you've already stated that they would be restricted to those applications that would either be matched to or who would bid on within the medical banding that currently is. I think what within the rest of the policy, it doesn't really give enough kind of protection, if you like, where it just says, you know, some properties may be, ground floor properties may be, level access may be. And what we're not saying that it only, they should only go to medical cases, but what we're saying is we would like a greater reassurance that, you know, when at all possible, that they would be reasonably considered. And I don't think the current policy, the proposed policy, is clear enough in that and given enough assurances that ground floor accommodation will be, you know, when possible. Yeah.
Sorry, before I ask for that to be clarified or answered, whatever, I'm going to bring Councillor Bell in for a minute and see what we've got there. And if I've missed anybody, I'm really sorry.
Thanks, Provost. I get a sense that a lot of this detail ought to be covered in standard operating procedures that probably exist anyway, and I feel we're getting a bit too bogged down in that level of operational detail. Our job is strategic and it's governance. I have enough confidence in this report as it stands, and that the officers and the partners know their subject matter well enough to be able to deliver very effective and functioning SOPs for the delivery of this policy. And also, in terms of a couple of times domestic abuse has come up and abandonment, and Claire has mentioned that that's taken into account. We deliver Equally Safe, which is the gender-based violence policy, national strategy in action, and that is taken into account. It concerns me that people might be frightened to report that there's a domestic abuse issue there. I would like to see our partners continue to do great work around the Violence Against Women Partnership to support people to report issues, and that our officers do not breach confidentiality when things are disclosed to them. I think that's really, really important, that people have that confidence to explain what their situation is. But again, I am really confident that policy is delivered in action. I know that because casework I've dealt with is evidence of that. So I would ask that we deliver this report today and allow officers to go away. The SOPs can pick up some of the finer detail perhaps, and then contributions around the table in the standalone housing committee is just the perfect way to take forward some of that more granular detail, but remembering that our officers are the subject matter experts on this. Thank you.
Definitely last time, Joe.
I would just like to move that we go for closure of debate. Standing order 18. I think we've had more than 8 speakers. Thank you.
Well, I would like to agree because I've tried very hard to give you all a chance.
No, I appreciate that, Provost. Thank you.
And your seconder is still Heather Dorn. Thank you. I think we're at the state of play that we could go to a vote now.
Thank you, Provost. This is a procedural motion from Councillor Scott, seconded by Councillor Doran, for closure of debate. So please vote yes. Motion is yes for closure, or amendment no. Provost?
Yes.
Deputy Provost?
Yes.
Councillor Beattie?
Yes.
Councillor Bell?
Yes.
Councillor Boyd?
Yes.
Councillor Braze?
Yes.
Councillor Cowdy? Yes. Councillor Cruikshanks?
Yes.
Councillor Devine? Yes. Councillor Doran? Yes. Councillor Duff?
Yes.
Councillor Durno?
Yes.
Councillor Fotheringham?
Yes.
Councillor Gall?
Yes.
Councillor Gregg?
Yes.
Councillor MacDonald?
Yes.
Councillor Mulcairn?
Yes.
Councillor Meekin?
Yes.
Councillor Mel?
Yes.
Councillor Gilbert?
Yes.
Councillor Louise Nicol? Yes. Councillor Proctor?
Yes.
Scott? Yes.
Yes.
Councillor Speed?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart? Councillor Stewart? Oh, he's now gone. Sorry, Councillor Stewart's left. Councillor Wan?
Yes.
Councillor Whiteside?
Yes.
No. Sorry, the motion is carried by 27 votes. We don't have any for the amendment. Therefore, we would go straight to Councillor Whiteside to sum up in terms of the motion.
Okay, I'll keep this brief because I think we've covered everything. The one thing I would say is that to bear in mind that as a council we have agreed the housing improvement plan, and we have to be aware of our obligations around homelessness under that plan. And also just remind everybody, we are Angus Council, we are all trying to work together to protect the rights of all our residents and protect the partnership arrangement that we've got with our housing association partners. So I ask you to support the recommendations as they stand.
And your seconder? Councillor Bray.
Just to confirm, as Councillor Whiteside was the mover of the recommendations in the report, the motion, she then gets to sum up. As the mover of the amendment, Councillor Scott, you don't have an opportunity at this point. And also, if we could just confirm, Provost, if that's okay, if I can carry on, confirm, has your amendment changed at all, or is it as was put forward? As put forward. Thank you.
Provost, we'll just go to the vote then. So the motion by Councillor Whiteside, seconded by Councillor Braze, is to approve the recommendations as detailed in the report. The amendment by Councillor Scott, seconded by Councillor Doran, is as provided by Councillor Scott in her initial speech, and the amendment was also circulated to members. Please vote motion or amendment. Provost?
Motion.
Deputy Provost?
Motion.
No, it's okay. Councillor Beattie?
Motion.
Councillor Bell?
Motion.
Councillor Boyd?
Amendment.
Councillor Braze? Motion. Councillor Cowdy? Amendment. Councillor Cruikshanks? Amendment. Councillor Devine?
Motion.
Councillor Doran?
Amendment.
Councillor Duff?
Motion.
Councillor Durno?
Motion.
Councillor Fotheringham?
Amendment.
Councillor Gall?
Amendment.
Councillor Gregg?
Amendment.
Councillor MacDonald?
Motion. Amendment.
Councillor Meakin,
Motion.
Councillor Melville,
Motion.
Councillor Gavin Nicol,
Amendment.
Louise Nicol,
Amendment.
Councillor Proctor,
Amendment.
Scott,
Amendment.
Councillor Shepherd,
Motion.
Councillor Speed,
Amendment.
Councillor Wan, Councillor White. The amendment is carried by 14 votes. Oh, sorry. The amendment is carried by 14 votes to 13.
Now, I'm not asking for a motion or amendment. We're having a stop for 5 minutes. And we're suspending standing orders. I think 5–10 minutes, really, just give people a chance.
Can we stop the
back in harness, folks. I'm going to suggest and ask, bear your indulgence and beg your indulgence, to suspend Standing Order 21.5, suspend this because that's your 3 hours rule, so that we could get to the conclusion of business. Can I get an agreement? That's fine, we'll sort it then. Okay. So, now we are on item 8. Now, this is a very, it's one that we've been speaking about quite a lot, and we should. Brechin Recovery and Regeneration Update, and I'm going to ask Mrs Falconer to introduce the report. Mrs Falconer is here in her capacity as the strategic lead for Brechin Regeneration and Recovery. She's going to introduce her report, her updated report this afternoon. Sharon.
Thank you, Provost, and good afternoon, elected members. As indicated by you, Provost, I'm presenting this report as the strategic lead from the corporate leadership team for Brechin Recovery and Regeneration. I chair a group of lead officers across different work streams, including infrastructure, housing, finance, communications, and community engagement. Jill Patterson, who is also here today, leads an operational group of officers who are working on Brechin Recovery and Regeneration. Jill escalates matters from that group that require further consideration and decision to the strategic group that I chair. In addition, I chaired the Brechin Recovery Committee, which brought together representatives from the local community, including the Community Council, local councillors, MP, MSP, council officers, local businesses, Brechin High School, and third sector and voluntary organisations. This group was essential in the initial recovery stage and enabled the community representatives on the group to raise issues on behalf of the community, to share useful information and to get updates on ongoing work. This report today sets out the current position and the assessment of the events and impact of flood damage caused by Storm Babette in the Brechin River Street area just over 1 year ago, between the 18th and the 21st of October 2023. The report sets out the flood recovery process in the immediate aftermath of this unprecedented event, which caused widespread and devastating damage and flooding across Angus. In Brechin, the initial response involved the local resilience partnership, including council staff across a range of services, Angus Alive, the Angus Health and Social Care Partnership, emergency services, partner and voluntary organisations. The community of Brechin, including community groups, local businesses and those from wider Angus, also provided invaluable support to people affected by the storm. In the year following the storm, council officers have continued to provide practical and emotional support to residents of Brechin, including drop-in sessions and phone calls to address inquiries and check on the well-being of flooded residents, both homeowners and tenants. Financial support from the Council's own funds and funds made available by Scottish Government are detailed at 5.4 in the report before you. Additionally, the Council applied for and received additional revenue support from the Scottish Government's Bellwyn scheme, which is set up to assist with the immediate and unforeseen costs to local authorities in dealing with the aftermath of emergency incidents. Mr Lorimer will be able to provide further information on this if required. Section 6 of the report highlights that in addition to the individualised support, clean-up activities and critical infrastructure repairs, 2 specialist reports were commissioned: the Flood Protection Options Appraisal from JBE Consulting and the Brechin River Street Area Housing Options Report from Arnold Johnson Consulting. These 2 published reports are complex, both in their content and how they relate to one another. Summaries of the findings of these specialist reports are in sections 7 and 8 of this report, with overall recommendations of the JBA appraisal report in paragraph 7.11 and the overall recommendation from the Arnold Johnson report in paragraph 8.17. Officers with detailed knowledge of these reports are here to be able to answer any questions in relation to these. As indicated, all interactions to date have been focused on responding to the aftermath of the storm, apart from engagement on the housing options appraisal. However, now that we have the finalised technical reports, information sessions for the community will take place on the 21st and 23rd of November to answer any queries on the reports. However, it's important to note that the options in these reports cannot be taken in isolation. Officers from various services are working to combine options from the two technical reports with any other possible alternatives and undertake an initial evaluation of options to shortlist. This process will help to identify any information gaps and clarify statutory constraints or timelines, as some options may require additional expertise. It's important that members of the community are provided with structured opportunities to inform the development of final recommendations to members, alongside an assessment of the technical, financial and operational feasibility of options. It's intended to take a further report to the Communities Committee on the 26th of November with an overview of the next steps and approach to engagement, and to seek approval for the set-up of appropriate governance to ensure member involvement to inform future decisions. While we aim to begin the further engagement in early January, the draft engagement plan will not be finalised until we have a clearer understanding of whether any additional expertise will be required and the timescale for that. Once a short list of options is ready, officers will organise engagement workshops to support the final decision-making process. We will be working with the Scottish Community Development Centre, the lead body for community development in Scotland, that will provide a skilled, independent resource and directly work with and support the community. Regeneration is, of course, not just about housing and flood defences, but also about building a more resilient place, taking a strategic look and developing a long-term vision for the town. Members will be aware, as outlined in paragraph 9.4 of the report, that Angus Council approved prioritisation of Brechin in the rollout of a new framework for place-based working, and the proposed consultation process that I have outlined fits with this. Jill Patterson will be able to provide more information for members around this if required. The proposals in section 10 of the report today, which inform the recommendations, are that members note the activity undertaken to date, the update provided in relation to the two specialist technical reports now available, and proposed information sessions with the community. Note that further work is underway to develop final proposals for members' determination as set out in section 9.3. And note that myself, as strategic lead for Brechin Recovery and Regeneration, will bring a further report to a meeting of the Communities Committee on the 26th of November 2024 to set out the next stage of work to develop the shortlist of options, proposed governance arrangements and approach to engagement with the community that will inform the recommendations as to the preferred options in relation to flood protection, mitigation and the Brechin River Street area. As I indicated, I am joined by a number of officers who have been involved in the work, and we would be happy to take questions. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Mrs Faulkner, and I'll invite some, first of all, comments. First of all, questions. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Right, I'll just get them written down. I'm going to go to Councillor Nicholl first. Councillor Gegg, if you don't mind, because I did see him earlier. And then, Councillor Vaughan, did you indicate? And anybody else? And Councillor Beattie. Sorry. And Councillor Speed. Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Nicholl first, please.
Thank you very much, Provost. I know we're at a very early stage. These reports and surveys are very extensive and complex, but I may have missed it. There does not seem to be any provision or water management around the Tannadice, Justin Hall or downstream from Brechin to alleviate flood damage in the future. Thank you.
I'm just going to ask Graham Daly to come in and answer the question.
Yes, Councillor Nicholl, the study that was carried out was looking only at the River Street area of Brechin. and it related to, in particular, the flood options study was the flood protection scheme that was completed in 2016. That doesn't mean that as a council we haven't been assessing and liaising with groups and individuals in the areas you mentioned, but also across Angus. A lot of these areas that were flooded do not have a formal flood protection scheme. So although this report does not address those areas you question, and there was many areas that were flooded, there's a longer list than that. That does not mean that we have not been working, as I said, with individuals and groups. Unfortunately, there isn't always an easy solution. If you have a storm event similar to Storm Babette, it is very challenging to protect from that. But a lot of the work we've done is even in terms of readiness and resilience. We've worked reference groups and individuals to Scottish Flood Forum. So yes, this report and the study that was carried out was concentrated on the River Street area of Brechin, but that does not mean as a council we have not been working and endeavouring to help groups and communities across the whole of Angus.
Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Provost. There's a lot of detail within these reports, and from what was said in the introduction there, there's going to be a bit of time before any sort of proper decisions are made around this. Some of the properties round about, well, particularly Meikle Mill, round about Nursery Park, are now being subject to vandalism, smashed windows, antisocial behaviour. That's obviously going to have a detrimental effect to the people that are still living within those areas after the floods. So can I ask, is there anything going to be done to try and to prevent that, or to stop that, or to do anything to support the residents that are still there in spite of the vandalism and the antisocial behaviour that's starting to increase?
Yes, I'm just going to ask Claire Greenhill to take that question.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Gregg. We have spoken to the police in terms of the ongoing vandalism that we're seeing down there. We're looking at what ways we can try and secure some of the blocks that are now completely empty, but also trying to keep the appearance quite nice so that it doesn't suddenly look like everything is completely boarded. I know that was a discussion at the operational group this week with staff. We've also sought help from the enforcement officers' teams in terms of the community ward and walkabouts in the area as well. And we are well aware, and we're reporting any issues we've had this week. What we found in Meikle Mill is Councillor Scott had reported a break-in, and actually all the water tanks have been taken from the property. So we are looking at how we go about and secure those properties, but without making it look even more unpleasant for people. So we're looking at engaging with the community about how we do that as well.
Thank you. And Councillor Bond.
Thank you again, Provost. Just a quick question, hopefully. I'm going to start off with Angus Council Press Office released a statement from Councillor Duff saying the Council is identifying what is actually achievable and affordable. Councillor Beattie was quoted as saying, whatever's decided has to be affordable to us. I think he means Angus Council. Rather than putting a plate of gruel before the people of Brechin and surrounding communities, why is the leader not shouting to COSLA for the money that Humza Yousaf promised us? This has been a long time coming to get to the stage, and now that we have a report in front of us, we can see that millions of pounds will be needed. What commitment do we have from the Scottish Government to fund the rebuilding of these homes, whether in the area they actually are, and I see the reports probably recommending not, or in a new part of Brechin?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Wan. I'm not aware of any specific commitment from the Scottish Government around that, but I'll ask Mr Lorimer if there's any other information that he can provide.
Thank you. Through you, Provost. Thanks, Councillor Vaughan. I think, as is outlined within the report, there are a number of potential options, but they haven't reached a conclusion yet. So it would be a bit difficult, I think, to ask for funding until we know exactly what it is the ask is, and that goes for both the housing options and indeed the flood protection option. So I think there has been significant funding provided in terms of the early response. But in terms of funding going forward, I think we would need to get to a preferred set of options before we could make any ask of government. Now, there are arrangements, as you can imagine, with climate change, demand for funding for flood schemes. It massively outstrips the funding that is available in the current round of projects. So that will be something that will be a challenge. But I think it's something to come back to once we're down to preferred options, etc.
Can I just... Thank you, Ian. I understand that we can't go there with a begging bowl and say how much, but we were promised that, you know, this would be funded or there'd be millions put aside for us. That's probably the cheap part, is the clear up. It's the building the houses. It's the building of the houses that actually concern me. You know, we've been restricted on social housing build. There's been projects that we know of in Edzell that's been put aside because we didn't have the funding for that. I believe there is more money coming. Has anybody actually started these conversations to say, look, Brechin is a needed area for housing? There's still a lot of people without homes or without their own homes. There's also the fact that we've got people that own these homes. You know, the question still needs to be asked, what's happened to these people that lost their houses there? You know, if they're on upper floors and the ground floor was still council housing, you know, they get knocked down. What's happening to all these folk? And it's kind of questions like that that I was hoping that we'd maybe start some kind of side discussions in the Scottish Government or whoever at the Scottish Government or Quango that we need to be speaking to about it.
Can I step in before you say anything, please? Because I'm aware that Ms Patterson would like to speak. Is that okay, Mr Lorimer? Ms Patterson.
Thank you, Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Councillor Wan. We have actually had ongoing dialogue with Scottish Government officials, and we have an appointed lead from the regeneration team at Scottish Government through the Planning, Architecture and Regeneration Division, who is lead officer for that, and they have brought in a vast array of colleagues to really work with us and make that commitment to working with us going forward. I think, as Mr Lorimer and my colleague Ms Faulkner has outlined, is in relation to actually what is the plan in terms of options, so developing those options. And we very much fed back to Scottish Government that we want to have an ongoing relationship with them as part of that process, so they understand the complexities. This week I have sent across to them the technical reports, an update from the council meeting today, and the next steps, and asked them how they want to be involved in the governance process to that, so they're able to brief their own ministers, understand where we're coming from as officers, and also from the community perspective. And I think there is a little bit of commitment there in terms of, I would call it little, probably with that little bit of emphasis, in terms of the Supporting Communities Fund and actually directing that through the Scottish Community Development Centre to really support the community and how they work with us, and give them that independent voice, so it doesn't feel like it's Angus Council, that they've got that support to really engage in what's quite a complex issue. And I suppose one of the things I would say as an officer, it's not straightforward. I can't give you a detailed plan because we need to get around the table and go, right, we've got these two technical inputs. What's the other bits that we need to pull together to start and develop that jigsaw? And the report to Communities Committee will sort of set out what is the ongoing update to yourselves as elected members and your input in that process as well.
Thank you, Ms Patterson. Now, I do have several hands. I'm actually going to ask Councillor MacDonald, because I have a feeling he wanted to speak in relation to something that's just been said. Am I right? And then I'll be able to get everybody in order after that. Okay? You happy? It's fine.
Thank you, Provost. Refer members to page 175 in the papers, which sets out the summary of the next steps. And maybe I could ask Jill or another officer just to remind us what 9.4 actually means. Because it is related to Councillor Wan's question about the ongoing strategy and what things will look like. And it's key to remember that the technical reports aren't, and I know this is a question, the technical reports shouldn't just be the focus, because it's all about getting other expertise from that sitting down round the table. That's the plan, or that's the idea anyway, if this is noted and it does come forward to communities. So I wondered if Jill could just talk us through a little bit what our place-based working is kind of could look like, not setting expectations, but just what that means, and just a reminder for maybe anybody watching at home that would know about that we've put through previously.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. So yes, I suppose there's a kind of twin track process. So we've got very much the response phase from the Brechin River Street area, and probably as outlined in the paper coming forward to Communities Committee is how we will work with people within that area, both residents, businesses, to really get into the detail of the specifics to the Brechin River Street area. I think it's also important to look at the response in terms of the wider Brechin, and that's where it fits in with the place-based working is, what are the aspirations of the people of Brechin for that area? And one of kind of key pieces of learning from other disaster areas and responses is that people need to have an active role in rebuilding an area. It cannot be a passive role, it needs to be an active role within that. Equally, I think as we move forward is, I've certainly progressing the work with the operational team is we have no parameters at the moment and we haven't set any of those, and that's where we need to steer from the community and we need to steer from governance of elected members around this chamber to support that. Big aspirations are complex, they're challenging, but if people can make those big aspirations with an understanding of the complexities, then that really sets out your business case for your ask. And that might be a long-term process, but the people of Brechin, that might be what they want to do. And we're there to support them and try and work with them to try and achieve what those ambitions are. I think it's also important to look at in the context of River Street. If you actually look back to the 1700s, that was the first street in Brechin to be developed, ironically. So it's a fundamental part of the area and it's a fundamental part of the history of the area. So it's too easy to say, well, we'll just walk away. And actually, can you use this as a catalyst to rebuild the town and really create that ambition across the town? So that's what we're intending to do, is probably those twin-track processes of the specifics of future of Brechin River Street area, whatever that may be, but also what the wider vision is for the town and how do we link together all the different strands of work, because there are a lot of interdependencies. I think what was really strong from the Brechin response phase was how all the community came together to support those across the town. And you see that on an ongoing basis through a lot of the activity that still emanates from the flood. And that's how we want to work with them. So I suppose there would be very much a localised response, but also a wider governance of how do we link that up with the wider community of Brechin so that everybody has an involvement in that process going forward.
Ms Patterson, and in order, I think I've got everybody. Councillor Beattie, Councillor Speed, Councillor Proctor and Councillor Cruikshank. Have I missed anybody? Okay, we'll start with Councillor Beattie then.
Thank you very much, Provost. Councillor MacDonald nicked my question, so no thanks, Mark. No, I was just going to ask Ms Patterson to actually cover the place-based framework. I'll maybe just give a wee comment instead of anything. I'll forgo my comment for later. Engagement is going to be absolutely vital for this. We need to get the people of Brechin and the surrounding area, in fact across Angus, because everybody's got ideas. We need to get everyone to engage. Councillor Gregg is absolutely right. From his topic from earlier on, our engagement has not been great, and we really need to improve on that. But we need engagement from all age groups, because these are long-term decisions, and it's going to affect everybody in Brechin. So we need all groups, age groups, every class, of a person that we can talk to, and we need to think about what we want from Brechin going forward. Not just the people that live there, but everyone. We need to think about what we want from Brechin. And I would like to thank, actually, a special thank to Councillor Scott, because he's been very supportive, and I think we've tried to work together, Jill, very well, actually. And so I'd just like that minute.
Thank you, and it's important that these things are said and we remind ourselves. Councillor Speed.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. It was just in relation to the equality impact assessment, and I just was looking for a kind of bit of clarity as to why it would just state neutral impact for the various groups with protected characteristics, and would it perhaps reflect a more negative impact on, for example, older people or people with disability? As we've discussed today, access to the built environment, there are barriers there for those particular groups, and I just wondered how that isn't maybe being reflected.
Thanks, Councillor Speed. Really, it was just because we were looking at the community as a whole and that there is an impact on everyone really within the community, regardless of protected characteristic. So we weren't breaking it down and saying that anyone was more impacted than anyone else within the community, which is why it's neutral. But I think everyone, we would all agree that everyone has been impacted, and therefore we weren't saying that one group was more impacted than any other.
Of course, yeah, I know that the impact has been huge for everyone, but I just thought it might have just kind of given some recognition that that in some areas that there might have been, greater impacts for some more than others, albeit everyone has been impacted in some way or another. Thank you.
Councillor Proctor.
Thank you very much, Provost. Ms Patterson actually answered quite a lot of the questions I was going to ask, but I'd just like to remind people that I was involved in the putting up of the current flood wall, twice my height, maybe even more than that. I never ever thought it would be breached. And as one really for Mr Daly, his comments is quite heartening to say that other areas were being looked at in answer to Councillor Nicholl's question about not only Brechin but further up the river and then elsewhere in Angus. Could Mr Daly could Mr Daly confirm that he's maybe been in communication with some of these communities regarding this and giving them a wee bit of reassurance, of they are not being forgotten about, plans are afoot to help them?
Yes, as I said in my earlier reply, we are endeavouring our best to engage with all the communities and even individual households that have been impacted badly by the flooding last year. We've met with communities including on the North Esk, including properties that were impacted by the Dickety burn. I could go on. And as I said, that's included one-to-one meetings with individual households or more formal meetings with community groups. What I would say to members is if you have constituents that you feel haven't had sufficient advice, at least perceived that there hasn't been the help they expected, please let me know and we'll definitely follow that up. I think the challenge we do have is around what is viable and what realistically we can do. In some, when there's small communities, to build defences for a 1 in 200 flood event is extremely challenging, to put it that way. We do try and advise in terms of, for example, property level protection that could be provided. But again, property level protection only provides so much defence. Again, if you have a magnitude of events such as Storm Babette, the likelihood is that many properties will flood again, and it's even advice around build back better. I'm probably getting into a bit of detail, and this is the detail that we've spoke to with the individual communities and households impacted. So I would just really, to members here, is that if you do feel that there's some additional support and advice, please let myself know, and myself and colleagues will do what we can.
Thank you very much, Mr Daly. That's very reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. And Jack, before I bring you in, if you don't mind, I'm going to bring in Miss Smithy. She's got something quite relevant to speak about. Okay, I'll get you in after.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just to add to that, Councillor Proctor, members might be minded that at P&R, just the latest P&R, we took forward a fund for community resilience. We're in a really good position in Angus that we have a very strong community resilience forum, and we have an officer funded by SSE who has been working to really support the communities along with the risk team. So that fund will support any of the communities that perhaps need any kind of equipment or materials or any further support, but actually there's wraparound support on that fund. So we've got Scottish Flood Forum in working with those communities to offer resilience plans and to really to really look and support them, all the communities that you're talking about. So that has actually gone out, and the first set of workshops have taken place, and hopefully that'll help some of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Audrey. And can I bring yourself in now, Jack? Councillor Cruikshank.
Thank you, Provost. As the area is being reviewed, can officers confirm if there is a pause on bathroom and kitchen replacements?
Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Councillor Cruikshank. Yeah, I can confirm that we're not doing any planned maintenance works down there at the moment, and we're not actually doing any allocations down there at the moment either.
I see no more hands at the moment. Okay. Can we move to the recommendations then? Is that okay? Unless you want to... I beg your pardon? So, beg your pardon. Yeah, would you like to comment? Now, you did ask, Jill.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I'm glad my colleague Councillor Nicholl raised Finavon, Tannadice and Justin Haw. I think, you know, I'm heartened by Mr Daly's response. However, you know, these people living in these communities are quite upset because I think they feel that everything's around about Brechin. Also, I would just like to say that, you know, whilst we all appreciate that it's, you know, it's been over a year since the flood, and I think we all would have, including all the officers here, would have liked to have seen the reports come quicker. The level of detail, when you actually see the level of detail that's there, it explains why it's taken so long. And again, I'm hopeful that, you know, that will reassure the community that everything has been looked at. The only thing I would say is I was probably disappointed in the level of engagement on the housing report, the 38%. I've also just would like to, I've lost my thread, honestly, I'm not with it today. I contacted Police Scotland because residents that have moved back into their owner-occupied properties are frightened. They're hearing windows getting smashed, they're hearing doors getting kicked in the night, they're terrified. I can imagine that it would be quite horrible, you know, it must be frightening if you're in a row and you're the only one there and the rest are empty. The place looks awful, it really does, so I appreciate what Claire's saying. And again, about Meikle Mill, the level of vandalism is shocking. It's absolutely disgraceful, and I'd like to, you know, probably beg whoever it is that's doing it to stop, because people are living down there and that's their home and they're very fond of them, their homes. Many have been there for years and years. So yeah, it's just really complicated, and I would again like to thank Councillor Beattie because him and I have worked very closely together on this, and it's been really upsetting for everybody. You know, Councillor Beattie and I weren't flooded, but we've been left, you know, emotionally scarred, I think, from it as well, just being at the rest centre. So yeah, but there is a lot of fear because there's, you know, we're talking about demolition of properties in two of the options. So I really, really hope that everybody engages, and that includes community councils, and, you know, everybody needs to have their voice heard. But yeah, and deal with this sensitively because it is people's homes and they've been there a long, long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Any more comments? Councillor Donald.
Thanks, Provost. I just want to thank the Brechin councillors for all the work and support that they've given to their communities. It's a big job being a councillor at the best of times, but what you've had to go through the last year has been really tough. And just to let you know that you have all the support from us across Angus, and we're here if you ever need us to sound off, etc. We're here to listen to you and help you as much as we can. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to place on record that's one of the nicest things I've heard all day. Very nice thing to say. Well done.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. And I'd certainly like to thank Mrs Faulkner and her colleagues for all the work that's been done on the reports. Clearly, that it's been a huge a huge shock, a huge trauma, and I think, you know, one's heart goes out to the people who suffered in Brechin. I'd like to thank council officers for the response. I think elected members, I think, are very proud of the way the council has treated the situation, all the work that was done in the early days to help people. I think that was a huge effort, and staff went above and beyond the call of duty. So grateful thanks for that. I think Councillor Scott has mentioned the fact that the consultation so far hasn't been particularly extensive, and I think that's something we identified, and that's why we now want to move towards a full consultation with the people of Brechin. Ms Patterson has flagged up the place-based approach to looking at the solutions for Brechin. We don't know exactly what we want to do, therefore we can't put a price tag on it. And as Mr Lorimer's explained, we can't ask for the government until we've got a price list and we've got a shopping list effectively. So we just have to take time. I think the important thing is that it is complex. We need to get it right, and it's not a question of, at this point, rushing it. And let's take a hypothetical situation. If we want to improve the flood defences, we're talking about projects that typically take multiple years. They're not done in 6 months. So I think we just need to keep a sense of proportion and how quickly we need to move, but we need to get it right. And I think we're committed to doing that. And there will be a report going to communities on the direction going forwards later this month.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Anybody else? Okay, can we go to the recommendations, which are actually for noting. So, do you want me to read all that out, or can you read it yourself? Fine. Okay, are we agreed? Thank you very much. Well done, colleagues. Item 9, and this is the proxy voting by councillors, the Scottish Government consultation, and I'm going to ask Mrs Watson to introduce this report.
Thank you, Provost. This report provides details of a consultation being undertaken by the Scottish Government proposing to introduce statutory provision allowing for proxy voting by elected members of local authorities in Scotland. Proxy voting would allow a councillor to nominate another councillor to vote on their behalf in council decision making. The Scottish Government has said it would be for local authorities to determine how a scheme could work in practice in their own areas and under which circumstances proxy voting could be available. At this stage, the consultation is seeking a response to 3 questions, and members are asked to agree a response to these questions. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions?
I just had a question around the proposed response in the appendix, because I think it says yes or no to question 1 or question 2, so I just wanted to clarify other than that.
So we've left those, so we will come to that. Provost will seek a response from yourselves in relation to that, and then we've put a proposed answer to question 3, and again we'll come to asking if you're in agreement with that. But yeah, that's for you to decide the yes or no. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Speedy.
Thank you, Provost. Mine was in relation to question 2, and I just wanted clarity as to whether, like, that list that was there, whether, you know, we can add 2. Just a note that it doesn't. It talks about attending to a person who is near the end of their life. It doesn't make reference to carers and their role and how that could be a group that may be impacted.
So at this point, yeah, we're asked in terms of question 2 whether we agree with that list, and I suppose it's open to members here to determine whether yes or no is the answer to that, and possibly if there is a comment that you wanted to add to the 3rd question in relation to that, then that would be the appropriate part to put that.
Councillor Bell, then Councillor Gregg.
Thanks, Provost. I'm broadly in approval of all the response there. I think in question 2, number 6, it might be helpful. If this does come in, then maybe a small group of elected members could have a discussion around the parameters there. Because I think what would be helpful is if a councillor has a number of councillor-related roles and have a major diary clash, it would be really helpful to be able to carry out your function by proxy, but absolutely not things like just because you're going to play golf. But have those criteria discussed before they come to paper. I think that would pick up Councillor Speed's point in more detail as well. Thanks.
And yes, Councillor Bell, I think at this very early stage that this consultation is being undertaken, there would then be a change to legislation that would then come back to the council, and we would, as you say, probably set up a group to consider the best way to do that, and then take a report to council as to how we adopt it within Angus. But at the moment, very much at the early stage.
Thank you, Provost. It's probably similar along the lines as to Councillor Speed and Bell's questions with regards to question 2. I know there are occasions where, whether we're in recess and people have planned holidays and they know we're in recess, but then a special meeting is called, having perhaps that included within that question. But as you've said, it's kind of us. So within this consultation period, this is obviously going to be set by the Scottish Government, which will apply to all local authorities. And so the ones that are currently listed in question 2, is that what's been put forward by the Scottish Government, or how much flexibility is it? Because obviously, as I said, if we're in recess and a special meeting is called and people are away, then that sort of takes away that ability to proxy vote.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. So yeah, that's the list put forward by the Scottish Government within the consultation, and obviously they're seeking feedback. So if we did want to note that, we could do that in the answer to question 3. So we could add a sentence there to the effect that we feel that list could be looked at in more detail.
I've got Councillor MacDonald, then Councillor Melville.
Looking at the time I could be doing with a proxy vote on this one. Lynn, if you could scroll down so I can see it. Keep going, question 2. So like it's options 1 to 6 and any other reason subject to the agreement of the full council. Joking aside, obviously, would it not potentially be better for us, having discussed this here briefly, to basically agree whether or not in principle we agree with it as a council? And then for question 2, seek our views via email or whatever after this meeting, because 1 to 5 is fine. It's the reason subject to the agreement of full council. So, like that to me reads like we all agree, potentially agree 1 to 5, and if there's anything else, we throw it, because it just feels, just when you're sitting discussing it now, it feels a little bit kind of all over the place, rather than, when you read the papers, you think, oh, this is going to be fine. So it just feels a little bit clunky. So we're basically then just agreeing whether or not in principle we agree with this, and then everything else is MOG.
I would say that's probably the position. So it's consultation, early stage, do we agree in theory, and then it would proceed.
I'd like to think I was just agreeing anything at this time of day, but never mind. Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thank you. That was the point I was going to make, so thank you for setting that out.
Right, can we then sum up then? Is that okay? Right, I'm going to say that the recommendations, you can see them there. and I'm going to give my voice a wee bit of rest. You can actually read this. Do I have to go through all this?
Well, I can. Do you want me to?
I wouldn't mind if you did, simply because I'm getting to the end of the voice right now.
So yes, question 1 within the consultation asks, do you agree that an explicit provision should be introduced to allow a councillor to arrange for their vote to be cast by proxy? And I think, going by that debate, the answer is yes.
Yes.
That's agreed. In terms of question 2, do you agree with the optional criteria 1 to 6, which could be applied by a local authority to allow for proxy voting? I think our... Sorry. Thank you. And are you agreed on question 3, what we've put in there, and possibly adding a comment in relation to the criteria at 2?
I think provided you put in that bit,
yeah,
Mrs Watson, that would be fine.
Thank you. Yes.
Item 10, the public body's climate change duties. Right, Angus Council, and I will ask Ms Patterson to introduce this. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I'm conscious of time, so I'll just do a very short intro to the report. So the Public Body's Climate Change Duties Report is an overview of the Council's compliance with its climate change duties. It includes a detailed technical submission which contains the required data and information we need to input to Scottish Government. Unfortunately, as I think we've outlined in various previous years, the submission that Scottish Government require from us is a large Excel spreadsheet, which is difficult to present in a readable format. So to try and resolve this, we've accompanied the last couple of years with a summary report in Appendix 2 that contains the key details from that technical appendix. From the papers you'll see on our internet browser, it was actually an issue with an accessibility reader that has resulted in a little couple of symbols appearing in Appendix 2. That has now been resolved and those papers resubmitted back to committee services for upload. So the final version will appear on the website, will have all those resolved. The report also provides an update on the progress made to the Council's measures to improve performance relating to sustainability and climate change, and on the progress made on reducing the Council's carbon emissions. Agreement is sought on the content of the report for submission to Scottish Government as part of our annual return, and I have my colleagues Kelly-Ann Dempsey and Karen Webster available online to answer any questions.
Colleagues, are there any questions? I've got Councillor Cruikshank, then Councillor Cowdery.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to make note of an amendment and ask the committee manager to circulate that among members.
I think you're going to have 5-minute recess. I'm sorry. It's 5 minutes, and it will be 5 minutes.
Can I just get clarity? Did you get notice of this amendment previously?
Can we pause the stream, please?
Councillor Cruikshank, sorry, I would need you to just maybe summarise, because the members of the public won't know about your amendment. I think we've kind of superseded everything by agreeing, but the public still didn't know what's going on. So if you wouldn't mind just being quite succinctly putting that out. And I would need your seconder. Well, you can't read out what you've written, really, if it's too long. But I mean, if you could you summarise it? Thank you. And you get your seconder as well.
Thanks, Provost. I'm asking the Director of Infrastructure and the Environment to provide annual reports to the Communities Committee detailing, number one, Angus Council's household recycling rate, including Angus Council's rank compared to other Scottish local authorities, and a year-over-year trend analysis for the past 5 years. And point two, I'm asking for the overall recycling rate with that also compared to other Scottish local authorities and the year-over-year trend analysis for the last 5 years as well. Thank you.
Your seconder, Councillor Greig. Okay, colleagues, how do we feel about that then? Is everybody happy?
I think we're agreed, Provost.
Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, Provost, and I'm happy with that in general. I don't have a problem with it, but I would just like to point out it's actually a little bit dangerous to focus on recycling when we should be promoting reuse and avoiding things going into any sort of waste. But I'm not going to stand in the way of this. I think that is something we should look at in future, reusable things that aren't actually having to be recycled. So cutting out single use.
Yeah, I'm a great advocate of reusing, as you can see sitting in front of you. I think we're there. Have we agreed this amendment? I would just like to place my personal thanks. That's been a trying one. Thank you so much. Councillor Boyd. Serena.
Yes, that was an historic hand, but it was just during recess. I did mention it's a pity we're not doing it per borough as well. I think these things would be interesting to see, but in principle, I think it's right. But it would be nice to see where everyone's doing well in recycling in each of the boroughs, and I would have added that to it. But it's all been agreed. Thank you very much. I meant to put my hand down though. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd, and Councillor Cowdy, and then Councillor Cruikshank, and then Councillor Melville. Possibly I haven't got that in the right order, but... Are we still on questions or moving on to comments? I can skip my question and just go straight to my comment. Please. Right. Okay. Is yours the question, Councillor Cruikshank?
I just wanted to say that I would like to add Councillor Boyd's point to the amendment.
I think we would struggle now, Councillor Cruikshank, because we have agreed. I might have given you that, but no, we've kind of agreed. Anyway, we've got a question from Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Referencing page 246, it was good to see the reference to the active travel work that's been carried out, and specifically referenced my ward of Monteith and Sidlaw with the stuff that's happened in Monteith, which has made a big difference. And I just wondered if perhaps Mr Daly could remind us of the total cost of the schemes between Broughty Ferry and Monteith and the NCN1 scheme between Monteith and Carnoustie.
Happy to do so, Councillor Melville. The Broughty Ferry to Monteith scheme, which was in partnership with Dundee City Council, the total cost of that project was approximately £18 million. And we had the official opening of that this year, as you're aware. The improvements of the NCN1 cycle route between Monteith and Carnoustie, in total, that was approximately £1.2 million that was fully funded, external funding, and again, that was completed this year.
And Councillor Cowdy.
So now we're on to comments, aren't we? Thank you very much. So I appreciate everyone's had a really long day, but this is a subject very close to my heart, and it's obviously an extremely important one. I really, really value the contents of the report. Thank you so much to the officers. And my comment is on funding. I know how hard our officers work to apply for external funding for environmental projects. This can be very time-consuming and onerous, and often with tight deadlines involved. I'm very thankful that we as a council have been successful in securing external funding, including the nature restoration funding from the Scottish Government, which is highlighted in this report. However, I'm very aware that external funding by its very nature is never guaranteed, and the future looks quite unpredictable in that respect. In order that we as a council can best improve our performance in relation to the environment and climate change, I believe we need to be able to fund our key environmental projects whenever possible. We all know that budget setting is around the corner, so I would like to make a plea for all councillors to explore how we can build further commitments to environmental priorities into our core council budget going forwards. This, I believe, is the best way to ensure we can make long-term and meaningful plans to protect and support our exceptional natural environment here in Angus. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cowdy. Now, I'm going to move on to, if everybody is at that stage, recommendations. And we have agreed, of course, so we don't need to go through all that. So, again, I'll say thank you very much and safe home.
Can we stop the stream, please?